If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. 3 Sudanese sisters, aged 9, 11, and 17, drowned after their overcrowded dinghy sank while attempting to reach Italy, German nonprofit rescue ship reported. Rescuers saved 65 people north of Libya, but found the girls' bodies submerged in water and fuel after evacuations. Their mother and brother survived and were taken to Lampedusa. The green dinghy, launched from Zuwara, Libya, had been overloaded and partially deflated amid rough waves. Survivors came from Sudan, Mali, Ivory Coast, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. Over 30,000 migrants have died on Mediterranean crossings since 2014. Russia accused Ukraine of a drone attacks that set fire to a nuclear power plant in the Kursk region, damaging a transformer but causing no injuries. The blaze was quickly extinguished, and radiation levels remain normal, officials said. The IAEA urged protection of all nuclear facilities but could not independently confirm the incident. The strikes coincided with Ukraine's Independence Day, during which President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged resilience and called for a just peace. World leaders, including President Trump, Macron, and King Charles III, sent messages of support, while Norway pledged $695 million in new air defense aid jointly with Germany. U.S. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard said deep state actors have infiltrated the intelligence community, politicizing reports and working against the American people. In a Fox Business interview, she said entrenched groups inserted partisan views into intelligence, undermining constitutional duty. Earlier this week, Gabbard revoked security clearances for 37 officials accused of manipulating intelligence, including Richard Legend, Brett Holmgren, and Stephanie O'Sullivan. She stressed that intelligence must find the truth and tell the truth, adding transparency and accountability are essential to restore trust and focus on national security. Mobile phone thefts in London surged to a record 116,656 cases in 2024, averaging nearly 330 stolen daily. Metropolitan Police data, obtained by campaign group Crush Crime, show thefts have risen over 50% since 2017. Women were most frequently targeted, with 61,000 victims last year. Yet only 169 suspects were charged, with 7 let off with warnings. Critics say police focus too heavily on online speech, while organized crime groups on e-bikes drive the epidemic. Losses since 2017 total about £365 million. Officials warn broader violent crime is also rising. Lucy Connolly, a 42-year-old British mother imprisoned for a tweet after the Southport child killings, has been released after serving part of a 31-month sentence. She described mistreatment in custody, claiming prison governors were pressured for political reasons, and said she was denied fair trial conditions and coerced into pleading guilty.
Do you regret pleading guilty?
Yes. Well, yes and no. Again, because I honestly believe, had I gone not guilty, there's a strong possibility I would still be sitting in jail now waiting for a trial. Once they've remanded you, they're in no rush to put you through the system.
On Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press, Vice President J.D. Vance said the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump in the negotiations to end the Russia-Ukraine war.
I think the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict. They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith. We are trying to negotiate as much as we can with both the Russians and the Ukrainians to find a middle ground to stop the killing. I think what the president has tried to do here is try to engage in very aggressive, very energetic diplomacy, because this war is not in anyone's interest.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
Well, welcome back. It's a midday in Japan, and it's 1 o'clock here. New Zealand, I think it's at 3 o'clock, and if I'm wrong, I'll be pulled up very shortly on that. Okay, big show today, big show for this hour. Victoria. It's a state of disrepair. It's a state of bad politics, and it's a state of, it's in a state, you might say. Let me play you a couple of things here, show you how Victoria itself, one, needs a new government, two, it needs a new way of thinking, and three, probably needs to re-evaluate where it's at. Premier Jacinta Allen has slammed One Nation for putting up billboards all over the place, suggesting that immigration is to blame for the lack of housing. It is. It is entirely to blame. If you bring in more people than there are places available, guess what? Cam, can you play rental, please?
In Mildura and Stall, there have been some One Nation billboards going up that basically blame the rental crisis on high immigration. Do you have a view on that?
It's the 1990s all over again. Look, I haven't seen those billboards, but that sort of divisive, false claim has no place. No place in Mildura, no place in Melbourne, no place anywhere in this state. And indeed, we've put through the Parliament laws against hateful behaviour, to make hateful behaviour a crime, to strengthen the powers of Victoria Police. And no political party should be engaging in this divisive, hateful behaviour. Firstly, it's wrong. It's wrong. It is wrong. It is also divisive. And particularly as someone who lives in regional communities deserve better than this rubbish from that outfit One Nation.
So there you are. That's Jacinta Allen. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's a fact. And Jacinta Allen, your party, is the one that has created this attitude of me against them, the divisiveness. It's your party. And we look at the opposition there is none. They are just pathetic. I mean, good opposition means you have good government. At the moment, we have dreadful government and just as bad opposition. Incredibly stupid. I'll play you another thing here. You know how machetes have been banned and you have your machete bins just like the syringe bins they have in restrooms this is to stop people from stabbing other people. By the way, in Melbourne on Saturday, a group of 3 were attacked with these machete-wielding hoons. Terrible people they are. Anyway, they attacked. So much for the machete ban. No one gives a rat's about you, Jacinta Allen, not even your constituents. But if you're wondering it though, if this isn't jobs for the boys, and by the way, Dan Andrews works for this particular company, and I've got the name of it right now. Jen will remind me in a second. The ones who make the bins. If she could just text me who it is. I think it's, I've forgotten. Anyway, we'll play this clip, and you'll be shocked at how much each machete bin costs. Now, don't forget, this is a bin for machetes, okay? To stop people from chopping each other up. Cam, can you play bins, please?
These bins cost $13 million. That's $325,000 a bin.
What?
So, as you say, I don't think there's too many criminals that are, on one hand, going into somebody's home in the middle of the night with a machete, is going to, on their way home, drop the machete into a police station, into one of these bins. It's a crazy idea. I mean, it's, again, a government that has no idea in terms of managing the crime crisis that we're experiencing in Victoria.
So there you are. There's $325,000. I'm in the wrong business for a bin to put a machete in. $325,000. Incredible. 40 bins, $13 million. And guess who works for that company? Dan Andrews. Incredible. Jen still hasn't gotten back to me, so I don't know who. It's, can't think who it is. Anyway, we'll come back to that later once we work out, but $13 million for 40 bins, that's incredible. And finally, before we get into our first guest, the United Nations Development Programme, in partnership with Bill Gates, What Could Go Wrong, has officially launched a terrifying new initiative. Now, the goal to strong-arm 50 governments into implementing a full digital public infrastructure on their populations within 5 years. Cam, if you could play that clip, please.
Actually, the position of the Australian government is quite Islamophobic. They basically say that if you are...
Talk to me about the 50 in 5 plan.
So the UN has partnered with Bill Gates on this, what they call digital public infrastructure. It's a very fancy term. And I think the simplest way to understand it is they're building a giant digital gulag for all of humanity. So the UN Development Program has officially launched this. It was officially launched at the end of last year, where they're going to get 50 governments, they call them countries, but really they mean governments, to impose at least some major element of this digital public infrastructure on their population within 5 years. So 2028.
Passports.
Digital IDs, and those are already emerging. In fact, many states are developing these now. I just went through the airport yesterday. You can scan your digital ID QR code, right? So that's happening.
And that's really one of the main reasons for the COVID
absolutely
nonsense.
The architecture that was laid down is the backbone of this global control grid that they're building. So then you've got the central bank digital currencies, which are already being unveiled. Right? They've already been released. The World Economic Forum just said a few days ago, 98% of the governments and central banks in the world are working on these CBDCs. Once they're fully operational, I guarantee you, they're going to start waging war on cash much more openly. They'll say it's a tool for terrorists and pimps and every nasty thing, tax cheats, everything you can think of. Then you've got the payment processing systems, and you've also got, we just had the head of the World Health Organization talk about this recently, the digital health certificates, the digital vaccine passports. They're taking what the EU developed during the COVID, which, by the way, the European Commission was promoting vaccine passports in May of 2019, long before anybody ever heard of COVID or anything like that. So they're taking all of this together, and they are using it to build a control system that will not just be able to surveil and monitor everything you do on an unprecedented scale. When you combine it with AI, the ability to make sense of all this data, it's just mind-blowing, but also to manipulate what you do. And so they're talking about this, again, pretty openly. If you look at the World Economic Forum meetings, they talk about the benefits of programmable central bank digital currency, where they will be able to say who can buy what, when, under what conditions. And then the Bank for International Settlements, Carol Quigley, to go back to him for a moment, Bill Clinton's mentor, the guy who really exposed this global agenda to create a one world system, he said the apex of the system was going to be the Bank for International Settlements. This is an institution that's almost entirely unknown to Americans. And what they are working on right now, and this is not a secret, it's not a conspiracy because it's not happening behind closed doors, is what they call a universal blockchain ledger. They want to tokenize every asset in the known universe, every farm, every car, every house, every tree, put it on this ledger, this blockchain ledger, and then you're only able to interact with this blockchain ledger using your biometric digital ID, using your central bank digital currencies. And so if I want to buy something from you, I can't just hand you a $100 bill. I've got to go on my device, connect to this blockchain system, transfer the central bank digital currencies to you. And so this is a mechanism for controlling humanity that I think is really unprecedented in human history. And when you take it all together, it's very obvious.
So there you are. It's in play now, and it's coming into being. And you watch the next couple of years. You don't have to be, as my brother would say, what's a word? He uses a word, a cooker. That's right. It is actually happening. And so we find that the world is becoming smaller, more controllable, and digital is it. I would probably think the digital that we should give the government, which I won't because there could be someone who's offended, but we should give him that digital. I think Kirsten Murfitt would also probably agree. Maybe not. We'll find out in a second. Now, New Zealand, I mean, the land of make-believe, almost make-believe freedom of rights, freedom of speech, freedom of body, all that sort of stuff. Kirsten Murfitt is principal at KM Law, and we're talking about the petition for release of the New Zealand Pfizer vaccine contract and suppression order. Kirsten, thanks for joining us. Can you bring us up to speed, please?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show. So with the release of the Pfizer petition, I just put it online on my social media, and we got 18,911 signatures. in just under 6 months. And then I went down to Wellington to Parliament last week and presented the petition to a MP. He's my local MP, Sam Uffindale. And now I have been invited to make submissions to Parliament to the Select Committee, which is really exciting.
Tell us about the suppression order that Mr. Hipkins is using to avoid public comment.
So Hipkins went on to a radio show about a week prior to that, and he was saying, one, he couldn't appear before the Royal Commission publicly because he might be abused. There had been no precedent of a minister appearing before a Royal Commission before. Well, excuse me, I think they should. And then thirdly, the most interesting one was that he said there was a suppression order in place. He gave very little detail around that. So what I've done is I have now done an Official Information Act request. So I did that over the weekend. So hopefully in 20 working days or less, I should have an answer.
Yeah, it just sounds like there's someone trying to weasel their way out of accountability.
Oh, I think that word weasel has been used quite a lot in New Zealand for certain characters.
Or national animals, the weasels. I mean, but they're all in Parliament, which is terrible. I mean, it says a lot
there are
about,
some good ones in there as well, but yeah.
it does say a lot about government, doesn't it, at the moment, whether you're in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, EU, and also in the US. Weaseling, I think, is one of the courses they take into deflecting what is needed to be said. How do we get around that? How do we make governments, do you think, how do we make them accountable? Because they know every trick in the book. And when you have a law firm advising their clients not to speak to a royal commission, I mean...
we're paying for it. The taxpayers paying for it.
Of course. I mean, it's terrible. How do we keep them accountable?
I think if enough of us stand up, so with the international health regulations, the 1 December deadline in 2023, I collected 26,000 signatures in 3 weeks, so they listened. So it's always where that political pressure point is, and if there's enough in numbers. So we're going into an election cycle in New Zealand, so I think it's a really good time for the release of the Pfizer contract. New Zealanders are absolutely outraged that the famous 5 aren't appearing before the Royal Commission. And I think there was a poll in the paper that was at least 52% were really outraged about it.
Wow, that's a lot. That's more than half. Do we know which government would have issued the suppression order?
No, we don't know anything to do with the timing, so I've asked for details around the case. I mean, obviously they're not going to probably give me everything I want, but if they give me enough clues, I've got to figure it out.
What about
there might be a suppression order against a suppression order. Who knows? Yeah.
What about the present government? Have they issued any comment? So I'm trying to do this without laughing. Oh, yeah, they've been forthcoming. Not, but have they issued any comments at all?
Yeah, I think most people are sort of actors making a lot of jokes about Hipkins at the moment and not coming forward. National has made some comments as well. But at the end of the day, a lot of these politicians were all in Parliament at the same time. I'm just lucky the guy that I presented my petition to, he came in at the tail end of COVID under a by-election. He's actually a really good guy, and I'm getting to know him quite well because we're working on quite a lot of the soft corruption in the local council here, because during the COVID years, they removed our democratic right to vote and replaced them with commissioners. So we had commissioners appointed and we weren't allowed to vote. And during those times, a lot of very interesting deals happened. So I think I've actually got a good politician here.
A good one?
I think so. He's new to it.
Yeah. Put a tracker on his ankle. We don't want them disappearing. And
his party is actually trying to bring in the digital ID at the moment for driver's licenses. So.
You've called for the release of the COVID-19 vaccine contracts. Tell me about the response or lack of at the moment.
Well, the response seems to be pretty good so far. I think most New Zealanders realise, because it got recently released that we spent $66 billion on the COVID-19 response. And a lot of New Zealanders have seen through it. Like at first, a lot of people were scared, including myself. But quickly, it just went too far. So New Zealanders are seeing the health system crumble at the moment, seeing like the cost of living. So yeah, people are annoyed with the weasels, shall we say. So that people do want accountability. And the thing is, we've lost so much trust in those democratic institutions over COVID-19 to actually get us back on track, so to speak. They need to actually start being transparent and accountable. Because people are sick and tired of, I'm sick of being tired of being told what to do and what to think.
I mean, you talk about trust with government. It certainly went out when COVID, but I think it was disappearing earlier than that. They often say it's to we have confidentiality clauses in contracts and stuff. Is commercial confidentiality a valid reason why the contracts can't be released?
No, absolutely not. Like, we are 5 years down the track. We have signed up for more vaccines to 2028. I found that information last year when I was searching. But under the Official Information Act, which is our Freedom of Information Act, if it's in the public interest, then information can be released. A confidentiality clause doesn't stack up. So we need to have faith in the procurement processes. We need to know how public money is being spent. And also, if there's an unsafe product, then we have to know about it. And I mean, we were all talking about myocarditis in early 2021 and being called conspiracy theorists, cookers, and works. And now all the information's coming out. Like, it is an unsafe product.
But it's interesting, and I totally agree with you there. And I think it is a very unsafe. What do they say? I think NZD SOS said once considered safe and effective, it's regarded as I've forgotten their hook line, but anyway, it's not safe and effective at all. It's sudden and unexpected. That's what it was.
Yeah, sudden and unexpected. Yeah.
But the number of people, I mean, and I would imagine it's the same in New Zealand as in Australia. I could bet you 10 cents to nothing that they would call another similar experience, such as, we've got this new virus that's going to turn you into a frog. I honestly can see that a great number, if not the majority of people in Australia going, whoops, we better go and get that injection to stop us becoming frogs. What is it with, government's very good at creating fear and using propaganda to the umpteenth degree. Why do governments need to do that? Why do they need to scare the bejeebers out of someone on something that has now been proven that it is way dangerous? But how can they get away with it, and why do they do it?
It's definitely the power in the shadows, and money talks. Like, I just was looking at some information the other day for my submissions, and I found that MedSafe, which is our regulatory agency, it gets 5.5 times more money from third parties than it does from the government. So who are those third parties? I guarantee it's probably Big Pharma. So I'll do an Official Information Act request on that one as well. So money talks. I mean, I don't understand why the New Zealand government was actually paying for Pfizer's marketing as well, and using, pretty sure, NLP. And some very interesting marketing tools. I found another OIA the other day where they were talking about children. And they said basically there was next to no risk for children. It was just like a cold. But unvaccinated children could get severely sick just to scare the parents. So, yeah.
It's interesting. I think it stinks to high hell.
Yeah. It does, and we need to have faith in our institutions. Yes, it's been lost, but we can restore it if enough of us speak up. And if there's been misrepresentations in that contract, our parliament, New Zealand's parliament, actually has a duty to hold Pfizer to account. And there's other things, like we know from the South African contract that they banned serializations of the vaccines. And I know that NZD SOS was tracking the early vaccine cards in New Zealand, and they were linking it to certain batches. And I think there was a correlation between one vaccine that came from Japan. So we need to know that information for public safety. Why are we obscuring the safety data?
That's a very good question. But I look at your government. We had, I don't want to look at your government, but I do. And yesterday we had Anna McLaughlin on talking about just for example, how they've been whacked with a $100,000 bill. Part of the bill was they were bringing to light and trying to find out the reason why your government puts in fluoride into water. And they said it's, quote, it's not for the benefit of people, it's for the benefit of the water. So,
Sorry.
so you're not denying that it causes all sorts of terrible things if you drink fluoride, because it's meant to clean the teeth. And anybody who cleans their teeth, they just don't swallow the toothpaste because it tastes revolting, but you don't do it. It's good for the external bit, but to drink it and ingest it into the body. But to say it's not for people, it is to make the water better. And if you poison the water to make it better, and so that people can't drink it unless otherwise they will get sick, surely that defeats the purpose of water.
Absolutely. There's a lot happening around water in New Zealand, and especially with our local councils at the moment. But that's one thing I'm quite interested in with the Pfizer contract, because we will recall that certain nations were meant to give over assets to Pfizer, so military bases. Other countries had to deposit large funds in overseas bank accounts. So what did New Zealand give up?
Yeah,
it just seems to me the timing of water, and we had the Three Waters reforms coming in around that time. It just seems there may be a correlation there. I can't prove it yet.
But it just shows you that the government is not here to look after the people.
No.
It doesn't give a rat's. So you have the thing with the water, you have the COVID vaccines, for want of a better word, and then you have also what they're doing to the animals, that are poisoning the animals. And don't forget, we all then have to, you either eat or drink or have some part of that animal in our food chain, whether it's milk, cheese or whatever. If it's poisoned, and they know it's poisoning, because you look at the poor animals in Europe, there's a whole bunch that are just getting very sick and dying painfully slow because of the, I think it's called bovar, which stops them from creating, killing the planet, which is it's just nuts. So there's just 3 examples there that your New Zealand government is neglecting you and everybody else in New Zealand to the
absolutely. But that's where I think we actually have to stand up, and more people are waking up to it. I'm finding more and more clients talking to me about it, especially people that have had 3 or more vaccines. I mean, obviously they know my stance because I ran for the general election and was called a cooker and everything in the media. But more people are regretting what they've done, and they're starting to connect health issues with what they've taken. And I think you are right. Like, with the international health, like I've been doing quite a lot of work around the World Health Organization, international health regulations, etc. And in the start of 2024, we were invited, the public, to put in public submissions for the international health regulations. And I did an official information request and found out what we were commenting on wasn't the latest edition. So I wrote to the government and said, well, how can I do public submissions if I can't even have the document to submit on? And we were told, no, you can't have that. That's confidential information. So it was completely farcical, the public submissions process. And I wrote to every MP in Parliament, including some members of Parliament. I had their personal email addresses at the time from running from the 2023 election. Guess how many people answered me?
How many?
And I'd like to, that many,
Gee,
0.
You would have been like floored. How magnificent. But it's
But
amazing.
I mean, that just shows how farcical the whole thing is.
But it does show you, though, that government does not, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, the US or whatever, it doesn't give a rat's. I mean, and we'll finish in a second, but I mean, even the data centers are bringing in, building governments, Amazon and all these to set up these giant data centers. Unfortunately, they do so much damage to the environment, water,
and use a lot of water.
But it's terrible. They have the audacity to say, we're going to make this planet cleaner, safer, and more environmentally friendly. By the way, we're going to bring in these big data centers, and it will kill all the water. And you'll have windmills and solar panels and everything all over the place. And don't forget, You can't drink our water, especially in New Zealand, because one, there will be none, and secondly, well, it's a bit poisonous, but it does some good for the water. Just don't drink it. I mean, you have got a very bad government. I do wish you all the best
Thank you,
the
mate.
future. And I think we need to keep an eye on this because you're not only doing this for New Zealand, it also reflects upon the rest of the world, and very important indeed. If somebody wants to find out more and support you, how do they do that?
So I'm on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, or you could go to the Exit the Who website, which is www.whoknows with an S on the end .co.nz, because I'm also doing a referendum to exit the Who.
Good luck on that one.
So I'm a busy lady.
Good luck. Kirsten, thank you very much. This is The World Today.
Thank you.
Mastership has exposed me to the world in many ways. I'm Iseka BCC, assistant boatswain. Hearing about mastership, one of my cousins was working with the ship. Every time he go to work and come back home, explaining, sharing videos and pictures about the mastership and what they do. And 2013, he told me, say, hey, the ship will be going in Benin. Would you like to work with the ship at some point? It was a long journey, and every time I said everything would be right, and if God wants me to work with mastership, God can make a way. And I went in Ghana and do my BSc. So in 2019, I came as crew member on the deck department, the best department on the ship. We are responsible for the maintenance of the ship and navigation, like we are the drivers of the ship. We are the ones that take the ship from one country to another. What makes the deck department the best department is the people I work with.
With Ishaka and the rest of the guys, I try to give them responsibility and see how they respond. And Ishaka responds very well, and I'm really privileged to have him as my assistant.
My favorite thing doing on the ship is to teach other people, like to teach new deck crew, like when they join the ship.
Whenever he's working, he's doing his best and always encourage us with the deck crew, talk to us, have fun with us whenever we are working, and also for us to focus on the job and do a good job.
When you are preparing yourself to come to mastership, always remember that mastership is a family. You are part of the family. You go with a whole lot of family, African, European, and all over Asia, all over the world. So as you come into mastership, open your mind, and I think by God's grace, your life will not go the same.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
Back again. Before we get into Robert Gregory, who's the CEO and president of the Australian Jewish Association, now I'll play this clip, which features Robert, but also I'd like to ask him about and talk a little bit about the right of free speech. It's all very well having free speech, but you need to hear both sides, and you need, and if they're only words, so what? Coming into Australia, people need to be given that chance to speak, providing it's not inciting any violence. And that, at the moment, we find government doing what government does best, and that's, to, as we would say in the classics, I'll be nice here, to mess things up. We have a couple of Jewish people that have been banned from entering Australia because of Israeli politics. Cam, can you play the clip, please?
Actually, the position of the Australian government is quite Islamophobic. They basically say that if you are part of the Islamic community, you support Hamas.
Australia, once known as one of the West's strongest liberal democracies, is now making headlines for banning Jews who hold mainstream Israeli right-wing views from entering its borders. Former Minister Ayelet Shaked, influencer and tech advisor Hillel Fuld, and now Israeli member of Knesset Simcha Rothman, all denied visas, their political opinions deemed unacceptable. I go into the kinds of views and the kinds of statements that they consider to be posing a risk to a segment of the Australian community, which they explicitly say is the Islamic community. The visa holder's social media and public statements mirror the policies of his party, including the elimination of Hamas.
Say, if you're part of Islamic communities and if you will hear someone saying you should eliminate Hamas, you will be radicalized and outraged. I think it's a terrible thing to say on the Islamic community in Australia.
It's outrageous. I mean, this is the minister in the department that's responsible for applying Australia's anti-terrorism laws. And if they have a problem with eliminating a terrorist group, that's a major, major concern. The Australian Jewish community has had a very difficult 2 years. Almost every single week, there's a major anti-Jewish incident. Simply coming and speaking in Jewish schools and synagogues poses no threat whatsoever to the Muslim community.
Okay, back now. Just latest news, by the way. Anthony Albanese has expelled Iran's ambassador from Australia and accused the nation of orchestrating extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression on home soil. And, you know, if that is correct, and it's been verified by Australia's spy agency ASIO, said that Iran was responsible for a string of anti-Semitic attacks in Australia in a bombshell finding that has prompted the expulsion of Iran's ambassador, and so they should be, because anything to do with violence, you get rid of it. Robert Gregory is CEO and president of the Australian Jewish Association. Robert, bit left field here for you, but what's your thoughts on the Iran ambassador being booted out?
So I got to say, I'm not surprised by this, even though it sounds like big news. It's something we called for a long time. Iran has a history of doing these type of activities in other countries. We warned the government in submissions to Parliament that they should expel the ambassador. In many media reports, you'll find us warning them, and not just us, other Jewish groups and the Iranian diaspora, people who fled Iran, who say that the Iranian embassy here had agents here that were monitoring them, that were engaged in these kind of activities. So we're not surprised. We think the government obviously made the right decision, but many years too late. No country should be carrying out terrorist attacks or violent attacks inside Australia. And so we're happy with the response. But again, I wouldn't give the government too much credit because they're acting after the horse is bolted in this case.
Just here, for example, one of the Australia cancels Israeli politicians' visa just days before a speaking tour begins. That's a senior MP. Her name was Simcha Rothman, and she was slapped with a 3-year ban. And Sky News says that they spoke to Minister Burke, and he said, if you're coming to Australia to spread messages of hate, we don't want you here. Can you tell me what her reason for the visit was?
So the visit had been arranged because I just recently returned from Israel, and people in Israel are worried about some of the incidents that are occurring in Australia, some of the incidents that now we're hearing are connected with the Iranian ambassador. So this MP wanted to come to express support, a solidarity mission, was scheduled to speak inside synagogues, Jewish schools. So it was really within the Jewish community to express support. The visa was applied for about 5 weeks ago. It had been approved 10 days before arrival, and then a few hours before the Knesset member was due to go to the airport, all of a sudden got the news that it had now been revoked.
Which is, again, we don't want hate speech at all, but if it's something you don't want to hear, it's not hate speech, so what? Because isn't that the idea of free speech? And it's, if you look at, go back a couple of years with COVID, for example, when they stopped doctors from talking, scientists from talking, and there was no discussion at all about COVID. You can see what sort of situation we got into, and I don't think we're going to get out for a long time. So surely something like this, even though we may not agree with Mr. Rothman, for him to come out here, it's always better to hear it from, as they say, from the horse's mouth than not to hear it at all. And doesn't that really say a lot about our belief in free speech? Because if we don't want to hear some people and we want to hear other people, surely that's not free speech at all.
Well, it's very concerning, and these type of bans always seem to happen to politicians and people on one side of politics. My organization did not support the ban on Candace Owens coming out, even though we disagree with some of the things she said. In the interest of free speech, it's important to have these views held. With the caveat, as you said, someone who's directly inciting violence, someone who's coming out and telling people to harm others, obviously that's different, or someone who's a criminal or a terrorist, that is different. But in the interest of free speech, we should be allowing multiple opinions. But I think this case is even worse because it's not just a member of parliament, but a member of the government of another country. And it's someone who already had the visa approved. So if there was any issue with something he'd said previously, don't issue the visa, ask for clarification, handle it quietly. But you can't just revoke the visa of a prominent member of another government a few hours before they get on the flight. Of course, it's going to make a diplomatic storm. It's not the way you act for free speech, and it's not the way you act in diplomacy.
No, I totally agree with you. I think, and it's probably a message that Australia was sending to Israel and also Mr. Rotman. I just want to know, why was Mr. Rotman banned?
So I've seen the paperwork. There's about 10 reasons given. Some of them are really quite extreme, as we heard in that clip you played, that one of them literally he'd called to eliminate Hamas. So it said that this kind of words could inflame certain communities, which is crazy because Hamas is a terrorist group under Australian law. So theoretically, even Australia should want to eliminate it. There were other reasons connected to internal Israeli policies that I don't think anyone in Australia knows about, cares about. So Mr. Rothman had been leading the judicial reform, which is a move a couple of years ago to take power away from some of the activist courts in Israel and return them to the elected government. But again, I mean, that's an internal Israeli issue. Probably the most controversial reason was a statement attributed to him from a media interview where a journalist, he was doing the interview in English, and I think it is taken out of context. I think if you listen to it, you'll see he doesn't actually say these words. A journalist says some words, to the effect of that the children of Gaza are your enemies, and he answers sort of affirming that. But I think if you listen in the context, obviously English is not his first language. I don't think it's as clear. But in either case, this is a old quote. So the government knew about this, when they approved the visa, and if there was an issue with it, I think that there would be a different way to handle it. It wasn't particularly extreme. So those are some of the reasons given.
Yeah, again, I can understand this is a message being sent by the Australian government, and we know what their stance is at the moment. And I think we're all in agreement here, no matter where you are in the world, that we need to stop killing. But that just doesn't exist in the Middle East. The same thing for Ukraine and other parts of the world too. I mean, if you look at Christianity in Africa, for example, there's been a whole number of people that have been Christians that have been absolutely massacred. Yet no one's talking about that, by the way. I think it's wise to be able to hear people and to get an opinion, or to because when you stop talking, we have this propensity then to become, whether you want to or not, you can become bigots or very narrow-minded. And talk, whether we like it or not, is the way that we can heal the world. And I think that we need to do more talking about peace, talking about cultures and areas of the world that we live in. Whether I agree or not with Mr. Rothman, I think Mr. Rothman has a right, and I think to be heard here. But do you think maybe that the reason why they did cancel it, because if you look at the current unrest in Australia with the protests and stuff, that there may have been a cause for fearing of some sort of violence?
So I can only speak for my community, and in the Jewish community has been here since the First Fleet, and I don't think there's ever been an incident, of the Jewish community, violence, riots, those type of things. It's a very peaceful community. So would people opposing the talk have committed violence? I mean, if that's the case, that's not a reason to cancel someone. That's a reason to protect someone if they're going to be targeted. But even then, I mean, it was an internal Jewish community event at speaking to schools and synagogues. So it wasn't like he was going to be speaking in the CBD to a large rally. So I just don't think it would have actually resulted in any violence. And in fact, I think the attention it got because of the way the government handled it made it much more prominent. We still held one event online and we had a screening of it. And I think it reached a lot more people than it would have because, I mean, quite frankly, most Australians hadn't heard of this guy, but now it was in the newspapers and on television. So a lot more people heard him. And of course, there was no violence or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how it was received in Israel. Can you fill us in on that?
So it was a big story in Israel. The Prime Minister reacted there, and many ministers did. The Foreign Minister. Israel's as we know, is in the middle of multiple wars. So for them to take time out of their day to comment on Australian issues shows how big a reach it had. I was interviewed by various Israeli media, newspapers, and television channels, and the Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments were front page news in Australia, calling Anthony Albanese a weak leader and revoking visas of Australian diplomats. So it caused a bit of a storm. And I think that now the Australian government has been both praised by Hamas and strongly condemned by the Israeli government. So it's not a good reputation that the government's getting.
What about our relationship now with Israel, doing business? How's that looking?
So the relationship on a diplomatic and political level is very, very damaged, and the opposition is pledging to try and restore some of that. But at the moment, I think ties are very low, which I think Australia should be concerned about because obviously the Trump administration is very close to the Israeli government, and Australia, we now have one of our senior ministers, Richard Marles, over in America, still hasn't been able to secure a meeting with Donald Trump. We know he speaks often with Netanyahu, so I don't think this helps Australia in that regard. But in terms of business, I mean, business people are business people. I think Australia and Israel do quite a bit of trade, scientific deals and things like this. I think that will continue, although Israelis I know a lot of Australians are worried to travel to Israel or to do business there. It goes both ways. So I've spoken to Israelis who are concerned about attending Australia for conferences. They get this idea that there's a lot of anti-Semitism. I mean, a lot of it is hyped up in the media, but there obviously are incidents occurring, and it is damaging the relationship.
What about your ambassador? I think it's Amir Maimon. He would have been in constant communications with the Australian government and our Prime Minister. Any comment from him?
So he weighed in a few times. I think the role of a diplomat is obviously to try and resolve things and keep things peaceful and under the table. So his statements weren't as strong as many of the political figures in either Australia or in Israel, and I think that's his job, to bring people together. He obviously has a very difficult job, based in Canberra and dealing with the government, and each day comes a new crisis, new criticism from the Australian government. So I don't envy his position. It's a delicate position, and I think he has put out some statements about it, and he'd be hoping to return Australia to the kind of bipartisan, strong, close relationship which we had with Israel under all previous governments until this one.
Yeah, it certainly has taken a turn for the worse. What about retaliation from Israel towards Australia?
So after the visas were refused, Israel revoked the visas of some Australian diplomats who are based in Israel but serve the Palestinian Authority-controlled areas. And they also announced that any official Australians applying for official visas to Israel would undergo extra scrutiny. So I don't think that applies to tourists, but I think any sort of government or leadership people that would want to visit may face similar revoking of visa as what happened to the Israeli politician and other Israelis here. So it's not a good thing. It's not something we want. Obviously, a lot of, I mean, I don't know what they mean by official. I mean, a lot of Australian aid organizations, education, other delegations obviously travel to Israel. So other than that, I don't know of any other retaliation. But I know with Australia planning to recognize the state of Palestine coming up in September, I wouldn't be surprised if there would be another Israeli response to that.
Let's just pop into Gaza City for a moment. Can you comment on Israel's activities in Gaza City? The world is watching, and again, we just see there is needless killing, and that's just not my own opinion. I think it's an opinion of a great portion of the world. There is a lot of needless killing, and I don't give a rat's whether, I can tell you now, whether it's Israel, Palestine, or Martians. I do care, though, very much that innocent people are being killed. So we have the Israel activities in Gaza City, which is not being portrayed as you probably expect also, but it's not being portrayed well at all for Israel. Can you give us your comments on that, please?
So what's happening in Gaza is probably the most reported conflict in the world. I mean, it certainly is at the moment. And I mean, it's not the most deadly conflict in the world. There's wars going on everywhere, not just Ukraine, but as you mentioned, in Africa, terrible things are happening. There's major wars in Congo and Sudan. These kind of issues don't get any airtime, and we have to sometimes wonder why. But the fact is, Gaza is in the news a lot, and it is a war, and tragedies and accidents and deaths and obviously happen in a war. So we should be pushing to end the war, which will end these things happening. Now, for the war to end, the Israeli hostages have to be released. Israel's not going to go back home and leave them there. So there needs to be a way to end that. Today we saw a terrible tragedy, maybe already last night in Australian time, when a hospital in Gaza was hit and people killed. The Israeli Prime Minister has come out and said it was a tragedy, and Israel's investigating what happened. But we know these accidents happen in war. Many of the Israeli deaths are due to what's called friendly fire. So obviously they don't mean to kill their own people, but the same way that innocent Gazans die, also Israelis have been killed. So this is just a terrible aspect of war, and one which, in the age of social media, in the age when everyone has a phone to record something, it's something that audiences around the world are seeing where they perhaps would have never seen in the past. About this is what happens in war.
You mentioned hostages. We see the odd report pop up here and there of dissension or conviction from Israelis who are now saying and asking the question: does the government really want to save those hostages, or is this just piece of the propaganda most likely, or is it just the words speak for the day? Because if you see what's happening at the moment, and if there are hostages in Gaza, surely you're putting your own hostages at risk.
Well, there's no easy answer. So the track record has been that when Israel increases military pressure, it often has led to these temporary ceasefires where hostages have been released and the war stopped for a period of time. And now most of the hostages are back home, or there was about 250 people kidnapped, and there's about 20 or so still alive there, and a total of about 50, including bodies. So the vast majority are back in Israel. So there is obviously a record of trying to get them back. The hostage families are divided. The majority of them, I would say, just say, make a deal at any cost, release whoever you have to, stop the war, do anything, get our families back, which is very understandable. But obviously, as the Prime Minister needs to weigh up, what the military is saying, what the hostage families are saying. Often we do see protests in the street in Israel. They're often led by the opposition, which are, anything's a political movement. So many of them are calling for urgently to get the hostages back. But it's not clear that at the end of the day, Hamas will release all the hostages in any deal. And both the Biden administration and the Trump administration said that the reason the talks would fall apart was because of Hamas, not because of Israel. So it's obviously very difficult. And there may be a partial deal, some more hostages out. Ideally, there should be a deal to release all the hostages and end the war, and can focus on what needs to happen after that.
Is this a what's the number one objective of this? Is it to have the hostages released, or is it to eliminate Hamas?
So that's a very good question, and it would depend who you ask. So a lot of people would say, if you get the hostages back and you leave Hamas, you're going to be back in this situation, whether it's in 6 months, a year, 2 years. So you need to remove them, because we know Hamas has said they'll do this again and again. So there'd be people that say, okay, 20 hostages, that's very important, but if you have another attack, it'll kill another 1,000 people or whatever. So you need to make sure it won't happen again. Then obviously there is the concern for human life and the concern for the hostages. I was just in Israel, and there's pictures of them everywhere. There's chairs set up everywhere, empty chairs saying, we wish you were here. So I think these two competing goals, and again, most of both of these goals have been achieved. So most hostages are back, and Hamas is mostly destroyed. Almost all its leadership is dead. Most of its weapons are gone. So I'd say we're 90% there on both of them. But again, how do you get the final, how do you get rid of the final bit of Hamas? You may not be able to. And how do you get back those final few hostages? Again, I hope it's possible, but it may not be.
Yeah, again, we see innocent people dying, and no one is exempt from God here. And God He will judge, if not sooner rather than later. But I'm just thinking, though, Hamas, a terrorist organisation, and it is, it has an immense hatred for Israel, which we both admit to, and vice versa too, because Hamas are a terrible organisation. However, the amount of killing certainly hasn't quelled the hatred. In fact, it's fueled the fire of hatred. So you would most likely think that Hamas, just because of seeing friends, relatives and innocent people killed, that would also help the recruitment for further members of Hamas. How do we stop that? Because at the moment, the fear will turn into hatred, if not already. And you do not want that when you're dealing with terrorism, because that will just feed straight into Hamas, and then the war will never finish, will it?
So I think you're right. I mean, recruitment is going to be an issue. There's a ready, available, always a group of young men, young boys that will join Hamas. The only thing Israel can do is prevent them forming a threat. So they can prevent them from acquiring sophisticated weapons, prevent them from getting close to the border. In terms of the population, it's never been possible to completely eradicate a terrorist group, but there's been many instances where it's been mostly done, and they don't pose that threat anymore. So ISIS, Islamic State, controlled a large part of the Middle East. They were carrying out attacks regularly in Europe, in other places, and they've been mostly defeated. Sure, there are still some there, and there was a lot of collateral damage, and there's still terrorists, but they don't pose even 1% of the threat they did. The same is true for Al Qaeda. So these groups cannot be eliminated, but can be pretty much defeated. And we did see that as well with totalitarian regimes. We saw it with the Nazis. They were totally destroyed. Of course, there are still neo-Nazis today, but they don't have a government, they don't have a country, and they don't threaten anyone in the same way. So I think with the right amount of force, it can be done, and there may still be hate in the population, but they can be made not to pose a threat anymore, as we've seen in past examples.
Do you think the hatred will ever go away? Because at the moment, there is immense hatred. How do we? I've gone way over time here, but how do we fix it, Robert?
So I don't think it will completely go away, but I can speak as a Jewish person. Obviously, Germany, wronged my people a lot, but there's no hatred today. There is no hatred. That Germany is now a model member of the world community. So I think the people of Gaza can be rehabilitated. People in the Middle East can be tolerant and accepting. The UAE, Dubai has great relations with Israel. So, I mean, just because it's the Middle East doesn't mean it's destined to be full of hatred. But I think it's not happening anytime soon. We need the war to end, and then we can focus on rebuilding and building ties between people. But I think we could be a generation or two away from real peace.
I totally agree with you. It's a terrible situation. And again, I have to tell you, I don't care whether it's Israel, Palestine, or Mars. Just got to stop killing those innocent people. I don't give a rat's about the politics. Just stop killing innocent people on both sides. Robert, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Robert Gregory there. If somebody wants to find out more about your organisation, Robert, how do they do that?
Look us up on any social media, Australian Jewish Association. You'll find us.
Thank you very much. Robert Gregory, Chief Executive Officer and President of the Australian Jewish Association. This is The World Today.